7:02, waiting for the meeting to start. With liberty and justice for all. I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Mr. David Bradley?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay? I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Mr. Nathan Fuller? Mr. Stephen Holland?
Here.
Okay. Mrs. Gail Mahalik? Mrs. Gail Mahalik? Mrs. Gail Mahalik? Okay. What would you like me to do?
It is not showing that. It is showing that this Mahalik is not on mute. Actually, hear background noise.
Okay. I'll contact her just to make sure she's on.
Okay, so there are no presentations, recognitions, or announcements this evening. We'll move on to public comment on agenda.
Yes, we did have one agenda public comment. Those I'll have for Ms. Wagner to read that, please.
Okay. Okay, so Barbara Bose, I have for courtesy of the floor. The first one is personnel. Motion B, hiring of June Potts as high school summer school teacher. Question. If summer school is not possible this year, will we still, as a district, have to pay for the teaching hours under Act 13 if this motion is approved? If not able to be taught in person, will virtual summer school actually benefit those that need the extra help? Why is there no information on how many hours per week or how many weeks summer school will be offered? Why is there no cost for this position associated with this motion? There is not enough detail in this motion and it should be rewritten. While everything is in question right now, certainly the possibility that there will be no summer school this year should be included if Act 13 or another act passed stated for payment would apply to paying for this if unable to be offered. And this is the answer for summer school. Summer school is required to be offered for our students who are in need of credit recovery. This will take place the same way it has over the past several years. The district offers summer school to students while using the online program that is currently offered through our Lawful program. Summer school will run for 2 weeks in June. weren't doing anything.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Melissa?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so on this agenda, we have a couple things that obviously have not been addressed properly by our school policy and the board. The first is the approval of minutes, which our minutes are very specifically identified within school policy, and our minutes do not meet those requirements. So that should be reviewed prior to putting such a thing on the agenda. Also, clerical, the bills being paid, once again, were not reviewed by our board members to the satisfaction. They were given on Friday. I found a phone bill that we're still trying to track down and figure out why we have a phone bill going to a Palmerton location. And I called the number on it, and the lady on the other end said she was appalled that this district was getting billed for a 12-minute phone call long distance from Palmerton to her as an ex-teacher. And then I also wanted to go over that the solicitor is aiming for a contract renewal to the board, lobbying us to renew his contract. I don't see it on the agenda. I hope that's not going to get sprung on us improperly. And then also missing from the agenda is last month a discussion over a tax extension to protect these taxpayers during this COVID adventure was tabled to the Finance Committee meeting to be brought back to this board, and yet nothing is on this agenda. So it's the lack of character and lack of responsibility that I'm questioning about the agenda. Secondly, or thirdly, if I guess we're up to four maybe, it shows that the election of the treasurer is to take place. I hope that we recognize that the experience of Nathan was weak in the past, and he does not attempt to get reelected as treasurer because he failed to provide his board, our members, with proper information prior to going to a board meeting on a regular basis, and failed to listen to his constituents when it came to paying these taxes, and failed to really understand the responsibility of the treasurer, which appoints a subordinate business manager to oversee what's taking place in the district. And it's that treasurer's responsibility to ensure lawful transparency. So I hope that that does not take place. Thank you. Hang on, I have my hand raised, Jonathan, in reference to Joy's comment. I agree with Joy that Barb is apparently shown as a participant or attendee. And secondly, last time, Betty Wolf sent a letter to our district, to our board, and it was not read, and it was argued to block and obstruct it from being read, public comment, during a meeting. I don't understand why this obstructionist attitude has changed inside of our virtual meetings when this would not be the case in a standard meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stern, I have no other comment. Mr. Stern?
Thank you. I'll confirm you can hear me okay? Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, good. Sorry. All right, so a couple things. We're in the communications part. I do want to address what Sue was mentioning, but I also wanted to previously mention that during your communication part, why did you not address the communications that came in from Nicholas, one of our student representatives, Nicholas Smith, asked that he said, hey, due to my obligations, I cannot join the meeting tonight. However, I'd like to, my concerns to this policy be brought up at the meeting. Are we bringing them up later, or is that added to the reading of concerns in relationship to the agenda, or are you going to bring that up as part of the communications with the district? Or is that just an outgoing communication?
I do not have that as part of my communication during that motion, related to that.
Okay, we'll deal with it then. No problem. When it says communications, usually it's inbound and outbound from the superintendent. That's fine. Sue, did the district consider what they're going to do in the event that we're still red come June 5th?
Well, if we had been read, the directions from us from PDE was that any school district in red would have been a virtual ceremony. So that would have obviously had to, the decision made had we still been red.
Okay, so the decision is if we're still red on June 4th, you're going to go to a virtual ceremony?
Well, we've been told that we are moving to yellow this coming week. So we are planning for a yellow ceremony in the sense of doing the graduation handout. Had we still been in red, though, the state had said to us that all red school districts need to do a virtual type ceremony, correct?
Correct. And who did you speak to at the state?
PDE puts out daily announcements to us. I didn't personally speak to anyone. We received updates from PDE via email, via push outs through the superintendent's offices and stuff like that.
Did anyone from the Department of Health get consulted?
By me personally,
anyone on our team, anyone on our COVID team, anyone on our task force, anyone on the board, other than obviously myself, anyone?
We're part of a group every Wednesday, the emergency management, and our Harvey County emergency management group told us that they do not give any type of opinion or any type of legal opinion whether or not to host or what type of graduation to host. So we actually have a committee that meets every Wednesday, and for the past probably 2 or 3 weeks, that was discussion. But as far as them giving us any directive, that's not something that they do.
So you're saying the Department of Health was not consulted? I have an email from Eve McMillian, who used to be a Lehighton resident, apparently, working at the Department of Health. No one else on this team, no one else looked at this, no one else got any of this information, and no one else reached out to the Department of Health prior to making a decision to have this gathering of greater than 10 people?
Again, Mr. Bradley, I'm going to say that prior to Friday, the plan was to go virtual, and prior to that, if it was not virtual, it was going to be students with only 2 guests, so that there would only be 3 people, myself and Mr. Brown present, which would have been 5. We weren't going with that decision now, and then we went to yellow, so we decided to go to the number of, there'll be 10 people present to receive their diploma, well less than the 25 requiring the CDC guidelines.
Okay.
At every point, we have been following CDC guidelines in planning this diploma handout ceremony, whatever terminology you want to call it, but we've definitely been following CDC. We've looking at the recommendations of PDE, and that's how the decisions have been made.
Okay, so do you know that there was a group, a task force assigned specifically after the newspaper article came out at the Department of Health in relationship to Lehighton's conflict in regard to the Department of Health's guidelines? I mean, a task force was assigned by the Department of Health. Did anyone in that task force contact any of the people on our team, or did they just contact someone on our board? I was only told that the task force, or that this group existed. I did not receive any correspondence from that group. I was wondering who did on our side. It says, the email says very simply, Mr. Bradley, I was not part of, this is from Neil at the Assistant Counsel, Department of Health. He said, I was not part of the meeting, but I was told it was raised that there is actually a dedicated enforcement group that was already created to look into the Lehighton graduation. Did that group contact anyone on our team? And did anyone review this with the Department of Health prior to running to the paper outside of any oversight of this board and deciding what you think you want to do?
Mr. Bradley, I don't even know what group you're referring to.
It's called the Department of Health, sir. You don't know the Department of Health? Come on.
But you're saying a task force was created for...
Correct. The dedicated enforcement group was created. This is by the words of Neil, the Assistant Counsel from the Department of Health, Office of Legal Counsel. Now, I tend to trust him. You, on the other hand, I want to clarify. So I'm asking you specifically, did you or did you not receive anyone from the Department of Health as part of this dedicated enforcement group to discuss the Lehighton graduation after the newspaper article was read where you and Ms. Howland decided what was going to happen within our district? And under whose authority did you decide to do all this? I mean, what policy change did you guys make without any board approval, without any oversight, without anyone putting common sense into the picture? Anybody? I mean, we had some issues here in this district with the safety of students. Unsupervised. We had rock concerts in our district. Who's overseeing what's going on here? It seems like common sense is being lost. I mean, here we have a dedicated enforcement group.
What is the concern you have with the way graduation is currently?
It seems to be in conflict with what the Department of Health and the state of Pennsylvania has arranged for groups and counties in red. We're currently in red. I agree that I'm hoping to go to yellow. I hope, and that would be great. And it might change from yellow. However, I think that the way you have it set up, I mean, are these people, no one even discussed it. I mean, it was decided and it was announced and nobody understands. So are these people going to have masks? Who's taking the pictures? Right? How many people are you going to have in this parking lot? I mean, if we can't have a church ceremony in a parking lot, how many people are going to be in this parking lot? And you're creating a parade during a pandemic? That sounds counterintuitive. Now, I think there's a lot of options.
Bradley, I think Mrs. Howland went over how the people would be segregated by their appointments and that there would be no group larger than 10 within the facility.
She said 25, but close enough.
She talked about, no, she said no group larger than 10 within the facility.
Inside the facility.
They would be segregated. They would be masked, of course, except for the picture. Would that be the family's discretion? And she did notify you that the Strawbridge photographer will be taking pictures for them to purchase at a later date and for us to use in a virtual presentation at a later time once it is all compiled with the student speeches by the valedictorian and the salutatorian at a later point in time.
So is the person handing out this? Somebody's going to be handing out these diplomas, right? How close are they going to get within the diploma?
The Department of Health, which is Dr. Levine speaks about that, and the governor speaks about that, and how we're supposed to act around people. We'll be following their guidelines, sir. You
didn't even talk to him, according to what Mr. Cleaver just said. He said you talked to some other group locally. I got a letter sitting right here from the Department of Health. I'm wondering.
Okay, then, you know what, maybe at a later date you could forward that to the office.
Okay, so is the board or is.
And try to address your concerns if appropriate.
Well, hold on. It's not my concerns. It's the district. We work for people. We're public servants, sir. So if there's going to be a graduation ceremony, first of all, it has to be lawful. We all agree with that. We have to follow the law. We're a government agency. We can't just pretend.
Mr. Bradley,
secondly,
you have stated your concern.
No, my concern is threefold, sir. I've only got a chance to state one before you cut me off. Hold on, I only stated once.
We move on.
I know, but hold on. I stated my concern. We're public servants. We're a government agency. We got to follow the law first. We got to protect the students second, and then we got to protect the community, right?
And that's what we will be doing.
I don't know if we'll be doing that because you abdicated your authority. You abdicated the responsibility to listen to the public and take
Okay,
input,
moving on now
and
to,
you pushed it
Mr.
upon.
Report, Attorney Fowler, do you have anything in your report, sir? Other than what was provided, the written report that was provided to the board?
Yes. The minutes do not comply with our own policy. Are we going to fix the minutes before you approve them so that they comply with our own policy? Or are you just going to rubber stamp and shove them through, Mr. Stern? Thank you.
Any further comments?
It was a question, sir. Are you going to answer it?
I don't need to be answering any of your questions during the meeting. You can make all the statements you like.
But the reality is, you do have a responsibility to follow the law. You do have a responsibility to follow your own policy. If these board minutes do not comply with that policy, this agenda item, which you control specifically and personally, should not be on the minutes. Should be not even be on the agenda. If they don't meet the standard, you should reject them and make them meet the standard prior to having them be approved. You should lawfully have minutes, sir.
Daniel, any further comments? Hearing none.
I have one. Why don't we look at the policy, sir? Why don't you look at the policy and see if they meet before you just approve them?
Only in his mind, Barry, keep moving.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call for the minutes. Mr. David Bradley?
No, they don't meet the requirements by the LASD policy, and therefore, no, they should not be accepted. Thank you.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
No.
Mrs. Rhea Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
I abstained since I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay. Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. Larry Stern?
Yes.
So 5 yes, 2 no, 1 absent, 1 abstention, motion carried.
On the financial matters, item A, I need a motion and a second to approve the Lehigh Area High School and Middle School activities funds for April 2020. Motion and a second, please.
So moved, Wayne. Second by Nathan.
Yeah. Motion by Mr. Wentz, a second by Mr. Fuller. Comments on the activities funds?
Mr. Bradley has a comment?
Yeah, no verifiable information other than an internal report was sent to the board. Therefore, this also should not be approved without verification.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Is there any other comments, please?
I have none.
Okay, roll call vote, Mrs. Wagon.
Okay, this is for activities funds. Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
No.
Mrs. Rhea Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Bell is absent. Mr. David Bradley?
No, barring any substantial verification, absolutely not.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Yes.
So 6 yes, 2 no, 1 absent, motion carried.
Payment of bills. I need a motion and a second to approve the payment of bills for April 2020 from the general fund, $1,022,341.26. Benefits, $1,606.95. Payroll, $1,258,882.29. And food service fund of $626 for a total payment of $2,283,456.50. I need a motion and a second, please.
So moved, Steve.
I have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by, I think I will second by Mrs. Cannelli.
Yes.
On the comments on the bills, please.
Mr. Bradley has a comment?
Once again, this line item on the agenda was not able to be verified by board members. And of the information we were provided, I verified that we're paying phone bills for people that live in Palmerton. Did anyone, Nathan, did you look at these bills prior to saying you're going to pay for them? Did anyone review these invoices? Anyone review this information before you go out and spend $2.3 million? And we also were told that we should have a question as to whether or not this is above or below the current and existing budget for the school year. I don't understand how you guys are getting away with not doing your job and then just rubber stamping whatever this administration puts in front of you. Wayne, how about you? Did you look at any of these? Steve? Rita, tell me you looked at least one of them. Can I find one? Sodom and Gomorrah time. One. I just need one, guys. Show me somebody did one.
Question, you said you contacted that individual whose number is in Palmerton?
I reviewed the bill, sir, yes.
Yes, but you said you contacted them specifically. You said it was a former teacher. Did I hear you correctly at the beginning of the meeting?
Well, no, you did not hear me correctly. Would you like me to explain?
Yeah, because I was under the understanding that you contacted this person. They were upset. They were a former teacher. That was what the beginning of the meeting said, but maybe I
misunderstood. Yeah, you definitely misunderstood. Did you review this bill prior to having it go to the administration, prior to going to the board? Did you review this bill?
I don't know exactly what your number you're referring to, but you may be referring to our substitute caller.
Oh, most definitely, sir. So you did review it, and you do know. So yes, we have a bill going to Palmerton that is a substitute coordinator, apparently. We left a message for that person several times. No contact was made. However, on the bill itself, it shows who that person called and their number. So I called it. I talked to that teacher who lives in Orwigsburg. We spoke at length. She even replied to me on an email, which we sent to this board, saying, what the heck's going on? Why is this board being charged for such expenses? And I said, we'll have to review it. I tried excuse me, sir. I tried reviewing it. I tried to get this district to start being more lawfully transparent so we can find out what's going on. And instead, you guys obstruct this information. I think you should review it before you approve it. Pretty simple concept.
It was reviewed and we look at that, like again, we do pay that landline is there for our substitute caller that the district, uses, and the individuals call that substitute caller. So that is actually a bill that if you would review and look probably every month, you will see that same number on there.
We understand that. The question is, why are we paying hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a year for one person to make phone calls when you have other programs within the district, like cell phones, that can provide that service without an additional charge? You literally have a dedicated, excuse me, sir, this district has a dedicated phone line to an individual's house being paid by the district. There's
That's correct. And that is also due to inaccurate and not very good cell service. We did have that discussion, but there is not the best of cell service there either at that location. So at this time we have a landline.
And how about voice over IP? Does she have internet service?
I don't know, Mr. Bradley. I'm just answering the question.
I understand you don't know. That's our job, sir. Your job is to do what we tell you to do.
Please.
Our job is to make sure that it's being collected, the taxes are being collected properly and dispersed properly. If you have a decision to make, Mr. Superintendent, that's great. Approve it through your board, verify it through your board, and the board decides. And when I have bills that I give to the constituents that I serve, they get to look at them and decide, this doesn't make sense, Mr. Bradley. Go ask the question. And I say, I will. Let's take a look. Let's make a phone call. Let's find out. And then we can verify that hundreds, if not thousands of dollars are being wasted because of mismanagement. That's our job, is to reel this in. This district is behind millions of dollars. And you guys, month after month, approve bills for millions of dollars without ever looking at them. Wayne, did you look at this one? Rita, do you have this one? How about our illustrious treasurer, Mr. Nathan Fuller? Did he look at this? Did he find this out? Did he talk to his constituents? I don't think you guys are doing your job.
I think we have I'm going
Mr.
to call the
Stern,
question,
could you
please.
please call the question?
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli.
Or we could hold everybody accountable. Let's hold the board accountable first, Rita.
Derogatory comments. Call the question. Roll call, Mrs. Wagner.
Sorry, I was muted yet. Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
No.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes, some of us act as a board, not as individuals, yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
No.
Mr. Richard Phelps, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
No, I'll honor my oath and act with fidelity.
The answer? Yes or no?
I said no.
Okay,
I need to act with fidelity and honor my oath. Thank you.
you must have been muted.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 5 yes, 3 no, 1 absent, motion carried.
Council reports. Item C. I need a motion and a second to approve the following reports: expenditure report, expenditure by object report, revenue summary, treasurer's reports, which includes general fund, capital reserve fund, capital projects fund, and food service fund. I need a motion and a second, please.
So moved, Wayne.
Second, Rita, and I did review them.
I have a motion by Mr. Wentz. I have a second by Mrs. Spinelli. Any comments on item C?
Mr. Bradley has a comment?
The only review that I was provided was this report, which is internal. Did you review something else, Rita? That I did not get?
No, I looked at the reports I was given.
And from the reports you were given, you were able to ascertain whether or not this is accurate? What verification did you use?
Are there any further comments on item
Duly
C?
noted.
We have none, Mr. Stern.
Roll call vote, Mrs. Wagner, on approving the reports.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
No.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
No.
Mr. Richard Phelps, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
No, they're not accurate.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Yes, and I'll contradict Mr. Bradley's comment by his claim that they are inaccurate. I believe them to be accurate. Thank you.
Unverifiable. To prove they're accurate. Prove it, Mr. Stern.
Motion
Prove it.
D,
Prove it, sir.
need a
Prove it.
motion and a second to approve the exemptions per capita and occupational tax per the attached list, enclosure number 5. Need a motion and a second, please.
So moved by Nathan.
Second by Rita.
I have a motion by Nathan, a second by Rita. Discussion on the approval of the exemptions.
No comments.
Hearing none, on to a roll call vote. Mrs. Wagner, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Phelps, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes, thank you.
8-1, motion carried.
On to motion E, item E. I need a motion and a second to approve the 2-year contract with the Safeway Driving School, which will be in effect from July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2022. Need a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Holland, a second by Mrs. Spinola. Questions concerning the agreement with the Safeway Driving School?
Mr. Bradley has a comment.
Why is this even being done? I mean, we have a $1 exchange in exchange for driving schools that are paid for by the students. Why can't they just do it themselves without us even being involved? Why do we have this contract in the least?
They are required by the law and by the Department of Motor Vehicles as well to have this contract. They do also use our facility. They use our facility for like practicing turns and different things. So this is something that they are required to have.
To be able to use our access to the student records, access to the facilities, for what purpose?
If they need to practice parking, they do use our facility to practice their parking, parallel parking, 3-point turn, those things.
Use of the facility makes sense that they should have a contract. I have no problem with use of facility. We have a policy for that. But here, this is a non-exclusive contract with the district and may choose to contract with other providers. It's for $1. It doesn't make sense that you're limiting it. It should be for everyone in the safe driving area, right? How many safe drivers were there? Didn't we have a safe driving policy and procedure within our district itself? We used to have driver ed, didn't we?
We did at one time, that was run by the IU, but this is an independent vendor who runs this program.
Sounds shady.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Bradley. Is there any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, just want to say I think it's a great program that we do make easily available to our students. I grew up in Michigan where every student was required to take driver's ed, and I think it's a great opportunity to start students off on the right foot as they learn to drive, whether the law requires it or not.
And Ms. Fears also has a question or comment.
Yes, my question was, what is the annual value of the contract? I see it's a 2-year contract, and I believe we've done business with this same company in the past. So how much do we end up paying them in a single year?
We do not pay anything for this program.
Okay, how are they compensated?
The individual students actually pay the program, the Safeway Driving School program.
Okay. Are students allowed to choose a different driving school if they wish?
I would imagine they could in different programs if they wish to take part in them. But the majority of our students do use this program.
And excuse me, Joy?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, Mr. Cleaver made an error. The district does pay for this contract. It is $1 per year. And then the students pay the rest, because without the compensation, there would be no contract, right? It would just be an agreement. So this makes it contractual. So that's the question of why are we doing such a thing? However, anybody can use any system, and your original question, which was diverted and not answered, should be answered by our administration, which is, what is the value of the contract? When this government picks a winner, the company Safeway Driving School that we've had a good relationship with and does a great job. And I agree, Nathan, training people to drive is a wonderful thing when they're young. But when we pick winners, there's an automatic gravity towards that company. And there's a value to that. And that value should be identified. It should be known. And we could make this contract with 10 different vendors if we wanted to. And that's my point, that we should not limit or pigeonhole our students to an individual exclusive contract even if it says non-exclusive, by default, you're picking a winner and a loser as a board when you let your administration make this information and not even tell you the value of the contract to the district and then the value of all those students that go to this company. That should be answered.
Have we entertained other driving schools to create a similar contract?
At this point, no one has come to us and requested anything, and we have not reached out to them at this time. This is one that we have currently used for the past several years since we removed ourselves from the IU pool.
And if you go back in history, Joy, you'll remember that I think Dwayne Items in the participant, he voted to remove the driver's ed program from the school and delete that program. And option 2, go to such a thing like we're seeing here. Maybe he could shed some light on it. I'd like to hear his information and his value to this. It might be notable.
Sure. Why was that done? Did that basically transfer the cost of driving school away from the school and onto the children's families?
Yeah, onto the students. Yeah, you're exactly right. So let's find out from the attendee if he's still here. Maybe he jumped off real quick when he heard that. Yeah, he's still on. Dwayne Item's still there. Can we ask Dwayne? Can we please ask Dwayne?
We're not going to play.
Hey, it's input from a stakeholder. Joy and I would like the input.
History lesson on what happened.
Oh, you have a history lesson. Thank you. Let's hear it.
That program was bleeding money at the time that it was disposed of from our agreements. This program then took its place and has been successful with the vast majority of students. No one else has come to the table to participate in the program on our facilities, although there are other driving schools available to students. And one of the niceties is these drivers observe these students throughout the course of their curriculum and also are certified by the state of Pennsylvania to administer the driving portion of the test. That way, it does eliminate some issues for the parents with trying to get appointments with the state police to have this procedure done.
The motion itself, Larry, if you go back and remember, was that the closing of the program was at a cost of up to $2,000. So we paid to close the program. And when you said it was bleeding, to whom was the bleed moving? Was it to whom?
More money for the vehicle. The new vehicle was required, and the standard rate had to be paid to the instructor for the driving time. This is a much more economical program from the student's perspective as well. So, and easier to obtain driving time to get the number of hours required with a certified instructor.
And what's the cost to the student of this program comparison to the cost to the student from before?
That information, and that information is between the student, parent, and the Safeway Driving School, not between us and them.
Do you think it would be relevant prior to voting on this motion?
I do not, sir.
I think it's relevant because by signing this contract, we create a preference for this driving school, and students will feel obligated to pay whatever that price is, and I would be really curious to know what it is.
Well, that's your prerogative to vote on the contract, then, Mrs. Beers and Mr. Bradley.
Or it's your prerogative, Mr. Stern. Hold on, it's your prerogative, Mr. Stern, to respect the needs of Joy and myself and others that may or may not want to voice this opinion and say, let's postpone this until we can get the information. Because prior to having the information, we don't need to ram this through.
There's nothing to do to postpone it. If you're interested in the rates of what the Safeway Driving School is, call them. You can do that, just like you called the number on that.
You're correct. And as a board and as a director, you can honor the respect.
The question.
You don't want to respect you don't want to respect your directors and just postpone it until the board can get the information?
Hey, but no one cares except.
I know. It's really comical, isn't it? The way Larry just pushes this through.
It's what we're voting on.
Can I do roll call? This is for the Safeway driving. Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Mr. Roy Beers?
No.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Radley,
No.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
No.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
So I have 5 yes, 3 no, 1 absent, motion carried.
On item F, motion and a second to approve the agreement between Lehigh Area School District and the Carbon Lehigh IU number 21 to participate in the Technology Education Legal Pool Council Consortium for the 2020-2021 school year. The cost to the district would be no more than $792 per year. Enclosure number 7.
So moved.
Motion and a second, please. Motion by Mr. Wynn.
Second.
Who had the first on that, please?
Mr. Bradley.
Thank you very much. First by Mr. Bradley and a second by Mr. Wentz. Questions concerning the agreement with the IU?
We have no questions.
Hearing none, we'll call for roll call vote. Mrs. Wagner?
Okay. Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
and Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 absent, motion carried.
On to item G. We need a motion and a second to approve the agreement with Concern Treatment Center for Boys and Lehighton Area School District at a cost of $48,732. Funding through the Title IV grant. Enclosure number 8.
So moved. Rita.
Second, Wayne.
I have a motion by Mrs. Spinelli and a second by Mr. Wentz. Comments on the agreement with the Concerned Treatment Center for Boys.
Mr. Clears has a comment?
Yeah, could you describe what we receive as part of this?
We don't, we actually are responsible for the educational program component by concern. So Title I has what they call Title I Part D, where they give us funding to help offset educational costs that are within facilities such as concern. And that money, whatever that amount is then given to them to help offset the cost that we incur, that it costs the district. So for reading, math, and language arts curriculum, to educate those students that we're required to educate, this is money to help offset that cost for that. So this is actually the amount that the federal guidelines in Title I requires us to, they come to the district. However, Title I-D goes fully to that type of program. Now, if concern is not there, then the district would no longer be required to do that and would no longer receive Title I-D funds. And in your, you could see too, it has a narrative in your board packets with the requirements for the district. No other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, roll call vote. Mrs. Wagner on the agreement with Concerned Center for Boys.
Okay. Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 absent, motion carried.
On to item H. At this point, I will call for the nominations for school board treasurer for policy 005 for a 1-year term effective July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021.
This is Rita. I would like to nominate Nathan Fuller.
This is Wayne. I'll second that.
This is Joy. I would like to nominate Dave Bradley.
And I'll second it.
Any further nominations? Okay, so we have two nominated. We have Mr. Bradley and Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Bradley requested.
Is Nathan qualified to do this job after what we've seen?
We have no other comments. No other comments, Mr. Stern.
We'll do a roll call vote to close nominations, please.
Okay, to close nominations, Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Mr. Roy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Phelps, absent, Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
Okay, that's closed.
Excuse me 1 second, please.
Good, Brad.
Excuse, thank you. So, obviously, you guys don't understand the concept of being able to be responsible for this. I'd like to nominate Larry Stern because I don't think Nathan can do this job. I really feel concerned about that. If I can get a second for that, we can unclose the nomination. I really feel concerned that the treasurer's responsibility is great. Can I please get a second to add Larry Stern as a nominee for treasurer?
I'll second it.
Nominations are actually closed.
I understand that. I just reopened them by asking for a nomination and a second, and I like that nomination and second to be added. That Larry should also be part because let's face it, guys. I mean, we haven't gotten any information since Nathan's been on that treasurer spot, and it's concerning to me. We have a budget that's out of control, and we didn't even get the draft of the audit. We didn't get the information. You know, we're not getting details. I think that we got to add. We have a motion and a second to add Larry. Take a vote on that and prevent it. Take a vote on the motion and a second to add Larry. Please.
I decline the nomination.
He's declined the nomination.
Okay, then how about Wayne? Let's add Wayne in there. Wayne can do math. Will you decline Wayne? How about Rita? Rita might do it. Somebody. Anybody. How about Rita? Can Rita, are you going to decline as well?
I'm not going to decline because I cannot serve. I am already vice president, and Mr. Stern cannot serve because he is already president. We've been through this before.
But you can get rid of that vice presidency very easily, and Mr. Stern can abdicate that as long as we control these finances. I mean, someone's got to look at these finances. You're bankrupt.
Really love that, wouldn't you, Mr. Bradley? You would love that. I have every confidence that Nathan is fine doing what he's doing. I trust him infinitely more than I trust you. Please call the question to close nominations, Mr. Stern.
Nominations have already been closed. We will now do the vote for the treasurer. When you are asked who you will vote for, please indicate whether it is Mr. Fuller or Mr. Bradley. And that would be roll call, Mrs. Wagner.
I move we dispense with this vote because we already know the answer. Do we need to take this vote to make it official or not?
Yes, we need to make the vote, Mr. Bradley.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
I'll vote for myself, Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Mr. Fuller.
Ms. Gail Mahalik,
Mr. Bradley.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Mr. Fuller?
Mr. Roy Beers,
Mr. Bradley?
Mr. Richard Phelps, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Mr. Bradley, someone that can do the job.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Mr. Fuller, someone to do the
So I
job.
have 5 for Nathan Fuller and 3 for David Bradley and 1 absent. So Nathan Fuller, treasurer.
Move on to personnel. Need a motion and a second to approve the following request for pre-approval of courses and programs of study for continuing education for employee number 1609. Motion and a second, please.
So moved. So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
Ms. Spinelli and Mr. Holland.
Yes.
Any questions on the pre-approval of the coursework for employee number 161609?
There are no questions, Mr. Stern.
Roll call vote, Mrs. Wagner.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
8-1, motion, 8-1 absent, motion carried.
On to item E. Need a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to hire the following summer position as per the hourly rate in the collective bargaining agreement for summer school. Ms. June Potts. Need a motion and a second, please.
So moved, Wayne.
Second.
Second by Nathan.
I have a motion by Mr. Wentz, a second by Mr. Fuller. Any questions or comments on the summer school program? I believe that was highlighted in the beginning of the meeting.
There are no questions, Mr. Stern.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. Any roll call vote, Mrs. Wagner?
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 absent, motion carried.
On to miscellaneous. We need a nomination for the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit Board Representative, which will run from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023.
I nominate Wayne Wentz. This is Rita.
I'll second that nomination. This is Nathan.
Any other nominations, please? I'll entertain a motion to close nominations. I need a motion and a second, please, to close nominations.
So moved.
Second.
And Mr. Holland. Roll call vote, Mrs. Wagner, on closing the nominations for IU representative. Yes, since there was one, we can do to
Close
close nominations and elect.
And elect Wayne Wentz.
Yes, please, thank you. Thank you for your input.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Sure.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Ms. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Wentz, for your continued commitment to the IU and to the students of Lehigh.
Thank you, you're welcome.
On the item B, I need a motion and a second to approve the attached list of high school seniors as candidates for graduation on June 5th, 2020, pending completion of all educational requirements.
So moved,
Motion and
Wayne.
a second, please.
So moved, Wayne.
Second, Steve.
A motion by Mr. Wentz and a second by Mr. Holland. Any questions on item B?
We have no questions, Mr. Stern.
Thank you. We will move on to roll call vote. Mrs. Wagner?
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes, and look forward to a sunny day in June, a sunny Friday again on June 5th. to item C. Need a motion and a second to approve the athletic committee meeting to be held on a monthly basis on the second Tuesday at 9 a.m. as per the recommendation of the athletic committee.
So moved. Steve.
Second, read it.
I have a motion by Mr. Holland, a second by Mrs. Spinelli. Any comments on the motion to hold the athletic committee meetings on a monthly basis?
Yes, Mr. Bradley?
Thank you. I was trying to raise my hand. I wanted our solicitor to pipe in for a second here, if you don't mind. Rita made a statement that the treasurer cannot be the vice president or president. Is that correct, Mr. Filer? I'm looking at the school code and I don't see that. I think false information led to that vote.
I'll get back to you, Mr. Bradley.
Get back to me how, sir? You're a solicitor. I mean, I'm looking at the thing right now, and there's nothing that says anything about who can and can't. Actually, the treasurer can be a bank official.
Okay, Mr. Filer has actually said that he will get back to you with a ruling upon that information. Now, your interpretation of the school code has always been different than our solicitor's interpretation of the school code. So with respect to both of you as individuals, Mr. Filer has committed to getting back to you on that answer.
Well, the problem there is Mr. Filer may or may not be our solicitor in another couple moments here, right?
There is no agenda to change the solicitor at this point in time.
Yeah, okay. We'll wait for that one. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I have a motion in a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yeah.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Ms. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. William Wentz?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern? You said Larry Stern?
Yes. Where's the background noise coming from, please? Thank you.
It's 8-1, okay. 8-1, motion carries.
On to item D, I need a motion in a second to approve the adoption of resolution number 19/20, calling for charter school funding reform, enclosure number 10.
So moved.
Second, Steve?
I have a motion by Mrs. Spinelli, a second by Mr. Holland. Comments on item D?
Mr. Bradley has a comment, and as does Ms. Beard. Mr. Bradley, I believe, had his first.
Ladies first. Joy can go first.
Thank you, Dave. I would just urge people to vote against this. This is an anti-education reform, and charter schools do a lot of good, especially in urban areas for poor children and non-whites. And this would hurt that and take this away from children who really don't have other options or are in a bad way of things.
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you. I completely agree with Joy. I read this. I want to know who wrote this. What lobbyist firm wrote such a anti-education reform? I mean, Larry, it looks like you and Patricia Denicola are asked to sign this thing, but who wrote it? That's the first question I have. I have two other ones. Will you please answer, since you're the one signing it, who wrote it? Which lobbyist firm wrote this?
Proceed to your other questions, please.
You won't respond to which lobbyist organization?
I you would proceed to your other questions.
Okay,
please.
so the other question is, at the end of this thing, we, along with the Pennsylvania School Board Association, are advocating for substantial change. So number 2 is, Pennsylvania School Board Association is a private lobbyist organization where districts pay millions, tens of millions of dollars to individuals, not government employees, to lobby our government. And it appears that they're the ones that helped write this, because all you have to do is a Google search on it, and it looks like a whole bunch of districts are trying to ram this through. So I'm wondering, whose team are you on? The students or the school boards association? That's my second question.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Is there any further comments?
I have one other question, sir. I said there was 3.
Okay, one more question, sir.
Great. Is there any compensation being paid to any individuals from the private Pennsylvania School Board Association to either employees of our district, board members of our district, favors, entities, other contractors, other subcontractors, or anything else? I mean, this is a attack on education and students of upwards of $1.8 billion, right? And you're not admitting to writing this. You're not admitting that the Pennsylvania School Board Association gave it to you to be their lackey and push it through. And you didn't review it to the satisfaction of whether or not it's good for education. So you will not answer any of those 3 questions, sir? Please give me your testimony.
Any further comments, please?
There are none, Mr. Stern.
Hearing none, I will call for a roll call vote on this resolution.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
No, I'm against lobbyists pushing around our government, our local government. Thank you.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
Absolutely not.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Absolutely yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
No, because I care about the kids.
Mr. Larry
They have a
Stern?
choice.
Actually, I vote yes on this resolution, and it is not an attack on, in my opinion, cyber schools or charter schools. It is attack on the funding model that is completely inadequate between what goes on from a public school and a private charter institution that actually is allowed to advertise and use monies inappropriately.
Charter
Instead of on their students. Thank you.
Charter schools are public schools, and they must follow all the same laws that we follow.
And Larry, you're completely mistaken. So I'd like to hear Rita why she voted yes. And Wayne, how did you rubber stamp this thing? And Steve, did you even read this before you rubber stamped it? I mean, come on, guys. You guys all just voted yes. I would love to hear. I think you should answer your constituents and tell them why you just decided that you feel this is for education and it's not against the education. Because anyone that reads
Right,
this,
Mr.
I'll put it up on the
Bradley,
screen.
I'm ready to tell you why, if you'll be quiet, please.
I don't know if that's...
I agree with Mr. Stern. This has nothing, it's not against anything. It's making sure that the money that's given to charter and cyber schools is as much money as we give our students, not more. And I have no problem with giving the tuition rate that we can do in our district to someone else's charter school. If they want to go there, they're certainly welcome to go there. But I'm not going to pay them $12,000 a year when they can go to our charter school for $5,000 a year.
But Rita, to have that discussion, we just paid a settlement because we failed
That
to
has
meet the
nothing to
free
do
and
with
public
this.
education.
Call the question, Mr. Stern.
No, Miss Spinelli, you're having a discussion that
Bradley, your comment is irrelevant to this particular item.
it is not. It's about
It is.
schools and how they're funded, sir.
It is.
And the settlement that took place Why is this discussion, by the way, happening after the vote? But go ahead. Do your thing, Mr. Stern. Hammer that gavel. Hammer that gavel, sir. Hammer
Yeah,
gavel.
we finished it. You're the one that keeps bringing it back up. On the programs, need a motion and a second to approve the first readings of the following Lehighton Area School District policies. Number 124, alternative instruction. Number 217, graduation requirements. Number 220, student expression and distribution and posting of materials. Number 333, professional development. Number 707, use of school facilities. Number 904, public attendance at school events. And number 913, non-school organization, groups, and individuals. Enclosure number 11. Need a motion and a second, please.
Prior to a motion on this, sir, I make a motion that all of these, and listen carefully, I move that all of these policy readings be pushed until after which the policy committee can openly review all of these policies in a public meeting in compliance with the Sunshine Act. In the last policy meeting, Mr. Stern got upset, gavelled out, and closed the meeting prior to these even being read. And since then, we've received letters from students and community members saying that this is a power grab, you're pushing stuff through, and it didn't even get publicly reviewed. So I make a motion, looking for a second, to postpone this adoption and first reading of these policies.
I'll second that, considering that these haven't been vetted by the policy committee.
Are these listed on our website?
Just for clarification,
No, they are not.
yes, they are, Mr. They are listed under files and documents. You will see agendas and you'll see minutes.
As of Thursday, sir, they were not listed prior to that, and they weren't given out to the public during that public meeting. You blocked pertinent documents from a public
Bradley,
meeting.
Can you please let me finish answering the question?
But tell the truth. Come on, tell the truth.
Exactly. So policy 124, policy 217, policy 220, policy 707, policy 904, and 913 were all reviewed at the policy committee in March. So all those policies were reviewed. The only new policy that was actually for discussion was policy 333, and that was because we had to add trauma-informed professional development. So yes, all those policies were discussed at a policy meeting, and I have no further comment.
But sir, regardless of your spin, the reality is policy 124, policy one, I asked for a motion in a second. You're making up information that is not accurate, giving it to the board.
Mr. Bradley,
You're giving it inaccurate information to the board prior to a vote.
Absolutely false. I was at the policy meeting on 27th, and so was Mrs. Spinelli, and we did review all these policies.
Yes, we did.
And did you give them to the public? How many people had them, sir?
Anyone who was at the policy meeting would have had them.
How many were there?
There's 3 months.
Go ahead, how many were there, Rita? Come on, tell us. Tell us how many there were, Rita.
Mr. Bradley, I believe you were in attendance at that policy meeting.
Thank you. And I know that the amount, I don't know if I was at the March meeting, but I do know that these policies were not provided to our stakeholders seeking input prior to this because it excludes sophomores in good standing. It limits classes of college to 2. It cuts the phys ed department by half, right? There's things in these policies that I know that this board did not review and this public did not review, right? L-Tri-C says sophomores can attend. We're restricting that educational guideline, right? That doesn't make sense. 220, I'm sorry, is an overreach of authority. We don't have the authority to do what's in policy 220 with student expression. The ACLU said we do not have this authority. Yet here we are trying to take the authority. 707. We had a conversation during that meeting, or at least one of the meetings, in reference to the proceeds to the district. It was never answered. This board is rubber stamping information that they do not have, yet was asked and not provided. So, no, I don't feel that they're doing their due diligence. They're acting with fidelity requirement by the oath of office, and I'm expecting this vote to be rubber stamped by the 5. But let's see if we can get this postponed until we can actually do our job and serve the people. Thank you. We have motion and a second.
Okay, that would be a roll call vote required to.
Hold on, sir. Sunshine Act.
Wait, can you?
Sunshine Act. Hold on.
Mr.
Sunshine
Bradley,
Act.
Mr. Bradley.
Sir, sorry. Sunshine Act violation. Hold on.
Bradley.
I have the right to do this. The public has the right to speak. There's a new
Can you
motion.
give me the minute so I can make a statement?
You said it was closed.
Instead of
You said it was
constantly
closed.
interrupting everyone.
You said
Any
it.
comments from the public on these policies? Thank you.
Can we please read Nicholas's letter at this time, sir? Since he made that comment public to the board.
We have one Gloria Bowman and one Barb Bowes. Mrs. Bowman has a comment. Yes, Ms. Bowman, can you hear us?
Yes, I was referencing policy 220, which I scrutinized today, and I'm not sure what anybody is talking about limiting speech. There is nothing that has changed in that policy except adding more safety features so that nobody is harmed by whoever the speaker is versus the group. So I'm confused about why that is saying people are limiting expression. And I don't know where is the graduation requirements for phys ed. I have not read that, so I'm gonna have to double check on that one. Thank you.
Hold on. I can answer Ms. Bowman to the question on 220 if you'd like.
Ms. Bowes is as requested.
Can you hear me okay?
Hear us? Yep.
Okay. My concerns on that policy is when someone using a personal device is not allowed to use their free speech requirements from the First Amendment, and I don't think that should be included in there. I don't think you have any right to limit what anybody says on a personal device. I don't have an issue with using school devices and et cetera because they're owned by the school. As far as the rest of it, I really think it needs to be looked at. Because you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and First Amendment is part of the Constitution. And I don't think you have any right to limit the free speech of any student or anyone. I understand that you're trying for safety here, but it goes beyond that. At least that's how I interpret the policy. And I just looked for policy agendas, and the only one available on the website for the district is the one for the previous meeting in May. There is no other agenda up there.
It should be under the minutes. It should be, if you look under their minutes, it should be listed.
Okay, I will double check that. Thank you. But that is my thought, is it's a slippery slope you go down if you try to take away someone's First Amendment rights, and it may well be that we could at some point be looking at defending the constitutionality of that, at least sections of that policy. And I don't think we want to spend that money in court. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Mr. Cleaver, would you mind reading that excerpt from the young man?
I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Stern?
No, did you receive that directly from Nicholas Smith or as a reply back from Mr. Bradley to Nicholas Smith?
I would have to look and see which way I received it. Was I on the original communication, or was it? I don't have. Someone does have it if they would like to read it. I mean, I don't have it right in front of me now.
Larry, would you like me to read it?
Sure, Rita. Thank you.
Okay, from Nicholas Smith to David, Terry, Rita, Larry, Jonathan, and Joy. These are the people who received Nicholas's letter. Hello, most of you have already heard and seen my concerns of this policy thorough email, I think he means through. I have an obligation with the LFD. With that being said, I cannot make it to the meeting. I need my concerns brought up at the meeting. You will not shut me down. My concerns need to be brought up. I feel that this policy is actively taking away our right, including the freedom of speech, and I will not accept that. My concerns need to be brought up tonight. Thank you, Nicholas Smith.
Thank you, Rita. My comment on 220 concerns the right of the district, whether it's buildings, whatever we're going to call the district today. According to some folks, they don't like how the district is defined, but from a perspective of what happens within the buildings, how it happens, when it happens, as a time, manner, and place activity, we certainly do have the proper authority to restrict what goes on within the walls of the buildings and on the property. Now, this policy does not prohibit students from doing things in other spaces. It just prohibits them from doing things that could hinder the educational progress or educational rights of other individuals and the safety of the other individuals. That's my comment on number 220. Thank you.
Mr. Bradley says, Mr. Bradley?
Yep, I'm here. I got to make the decision of whether I read this policy to Larry so that he can comprehend what this policy says, or I ask Barbose to do it, because if I do it, Larry's just going to discount and throw it away anyway. Regretfully, it appears that the reading comprehension is flawed. Now, there's an ACLU excerpt that I just put up online, and it basically says that school officials cannot stop students from posting to social network sites like Facebook when they're outside of the school. So that is in direct, and the law was clear on this. So that is in direct violation of the First Amendment rights of individual students. So either I just proved my point that Larry rubber stamps things without reviewing them properly, and Jonathan makes up statements about how things happen, and then they can't find them on the web, and we obstruct lawful transparency. And then you got this 6 policies going through the power grab, and we're talking graduation, we're talking use of property, we're talking free expression of individual students. It's a paragraph. And I'm disappointed that I can find and prove that these people are falsely giving information to a board of directors in a public meeting and not being corrected by the board that has a responsibility to the public. Thank you.
Mr. Bradley, again, this policy is not saying students can't post. What it says is that if they are posting something that threatens serious harm to the school or community, encourages unlawful activity, or interferes with another's rights, it's also not permitted. It doesn't say that they're not permitted to do that. Nowhere in this policy does it says that students can't post things. When it becomes an interference with the school district, if there is something that is written on social media that we're notified of, then we can respond to it. Again, if you would look through this policy, you would probably see the word safety almost a dozen times.
Yeah, I'm hidden in plain sight, but look at read number.
Mr. Bradley,
You don't want to read part of this policy? You just read the part you wanted to read. Did you read it? Fine. Mr. Cleaver, I concede. Let everybody rubber stamp you. They don't have to read the policy. They don't have to look at it. They can just follow your lead. They trust you. Thank you. I do not, but apparently they do.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. So we had a motion and a second to table, postpone the vote. Is there anyone willing to pull back that motion or second to postpone the vote?
Absolutely not, sir. You should be held accountable to the school.
Okay, since we had Is there any other discussion on this topic prior to going to a roll call vote?
Can I ask a question? This is Steve talking.
Go ahead, Steve.
My question is, it says we're to approve the first readings. This is not where it's a final. Can't we vote that we can approve the first reading and make, with our policy board, say fine tune this? If there's fine tuning to be needed?
That is an
That's it.
absolutely acceptable
I hope you
process.
understood what I was trying to sell.
Yes, Steve, we did, and that's an absolutely acceptable process.
Steve, did you read this at all yet? Steve, did you read it?
For your sake, Mr. Bradley, yes, I did.
And did you find anything wrong with it?
No, I did not. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
I'm not disappointed. I respect that you probably don't understand. It's fine. I just wanted to know if you read it
Okay, here we
and
go.
know if you did it.
Okay,
That's all.
back to roll call vote. Mrs. Wagner on postponing. Has I've heard that Mrs. Bose has not had the chance to speak again.
Ms. Bose did speak on the policy.
I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way, guys. If someone's on a public, she's allowed to speak again.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I have checked the committee minutes. There is no agenda for March 4th up there.
Okay.
It's just the minutes. Now, if we don't have agendas up, then how can anyone decide whether or not they want to even attend a meeting? They don't know what's going to be discussed. Now, perhaps it was, and I missed it, but then again, maybe it wasn't because it's nowhere to be found on the district website.
We could check that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Bose. Ms. Wagner, we will vote on postponement first. Roll call, please.
Okay, this is to postpone the first readings. Mr. Nathan Fuller?
No.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
No.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
No.
Mr. Wayne West?
No.
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes, this should be postponed until it can be reviewed, all of these policies. Thank you.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Vote no to postpone.
Okay, so I have 3 yes, 5 no, 1 absent. So motion denied.
Okay, I need a motion and a second to approve the first reading of the following Lehigh Area School District policies. Number 1, 124, number 2, 217, number 3, 220, number 4, 333, there's a typo there, Mrs. Wagner. It should be number 5, 707, number 6, 904, and number 7, 913. The agenda on display has 2 4s. Need a motion and a second, please, with the correction of the numbering of the policies.
I will, hold on a second, guys. My hand was raised. I will, I'll make a correction to that motion that I'll say okay to number 4. And then, I'm sorry, I'll use the numbers. 333 and 707. All the other ones need critical review that has not been done. So I'd like to make a motion, if I get a second, to approve the first reading of number 333 and 707. Can I get a second for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Gail.
Welcome.
I have a motion by Mr. Bradley, a second by Ms. Mahalik on removing all policies except 333 and 707 from the approval of the first reading. Any comments on that activity, please?
At this time, there are no comments. Oh, hold on, Ms. Bose. Ms. Bose?
Yes, okay. If this was done at the March 4th meeting, why was it redone at the May meeting as first readings?
We did this because of the delay. There was no March meeting, so we wanted to have an opportunity to bring everyone's attention back to them because it was so long that we didn't have a meeting because of the pandemic. And so they were listed again on the agenda for them.
Yeah, you mean on the policy committee meeting?
Yes, and then there was no meeting in March, and then we wanted to bring them up.
Okay, I understand. That was my question. Thank you.
No other comments, Mr. Chairman.
So I have a motion and a second. We need a roll call vote on the approval to modify the motion to only include policy 333 and policy 707. Roll call vote, Ms. Wagner.
Okay. Mr. Stephen Holland?
No.
Ms. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Ms. Rita Spinelli?
No.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
No.
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
I say yes. Does that make it 5-3, guys? Oh wait, we still gotta let someone else vote.
Mr.
Sorry.
Nathan Fuller?
No.
Mr. Larry Stern?
No.
Now it's 5-3. Sorry. Thank you.
No.
Thank you,
Motion
sir.
denied.
So we're back to the original item A. I need a motion and a second to approve the first readings of the following Lehigh Area School District policies: 124, 217, 220, 333, 707, 904, 913. And again, this is a closure 11. And again, this is the first reading. Should there be amendments or comments, please provide them to the policy committee for later review.
So moved by Nathan.
Second by Rita.
I got a motion by Mr. Fuller and a second by Mrs. Spinelli.
Mr.
Any
Bradley,
further comments, please?
Mr. Bradley has requested comment.
Thank you. Larry, it's obvious that policy 124 is excluding sophomores. Why did you limit that? Why do you limit the classes? It's policy 217 removes phys ed and adds in art and then lowers the credits, right? Why did you do that? LCC says, LTRI-C says that sophomores can be provided. Why would we exclude them? There's guidelines for completing graduation by the state. Why are we exceeding those? And 707, we still never got the information regarding the PIAA events and the proceeds. How can you make a decision to read a policy if we don't know how it impacts the financial benefits of the district? Much like last month when we were trying to save these taxpayers some money and you said it had to go through the finance committee. So the fact that you've pushed it through to here without that oversight, to me, is immoral.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? No further, Mr. Bradley. On number 124, that item was discussed at the policy meeting in March. Number 217, the same. Thank you.
But the decision was the PSBA. Hold on. You made a comment on answering. The PSBA was the one that wrote these policies. That private corporation that is honored by Larry and Rita to the point where we don't even have to read these. We have other people that do it for us, and then we push it through. Who are you to question what they say? That attitude is wrong, and we need to correct it here in this board meeting because the public has to be served by their public officials, not lobbyist rubber stampers, right? Not a single word was changed by Larry or Rita from the policy provided to them. And they're the policy writers. Despicable.
Any further comments, please? Roll call vote to approve the first reading of the policies. Mrs. Wagner.
Okay. Mrs. Gail Mahalik? Mrs. Gail Mahalik? I'm not getting an answer. Okay. Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers?
No.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
I'll be one of the 3 against the 5. I'll say no.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik.
No.
Okay, so it's 5 yes, 3 no, 1 absent, motion carries.
On to item B. We need a motion and a second to approve the 2021 school calendar for the Heighton Area School District enclosure number 12.
So moved.
Second, Wayne. First by Mr. Holland, and second by Mr. Wentz on the approval of the 2021 school calendar for the Heighton Area School District. Comments?
Just for clarification, this is subject to change only because the PE was going to be putting guidelines out for reopening of schools. I know there's a lot of different discussion out there when start times may be for the fall, but at this point, they have not given us a definite they have to start before or after Labor Day. But in the event that happens, we may need to come back to the board for a revision for the school calendar, depending on what those guidelines are.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Cleaver. Is there any further comments?
I see none.
Roll call vote to approve the school calendar. Mrs. Wagner?
Mrs. Rita Spinelli,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz,
Yes.
Ms. Joy Beers,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent, Mr. David Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
Yes.
So that's 8 yes, 1 absent, motion carried.
On to item C, I need a motion and a second to approve the Heighton Area School District Coaches Handbook as recommended by the Athletic Committee, enclosure number 13.
So moved, Wayne.
Second, Rita.
I have a motion by Mr. Wentz and a second by Mr. Spinelli to approve the Heighton Area School District Coaches Handbook as recommended by the Athletic Committee. Comments, please?
Mr. Bradley has a question or comment?
Wayne, Steve, I think Joy, you're on the athletic committee. Am I correct?
I am not.
Okay, I know Wayne and Steve are. Who else is? Anybody?
I believe that would be me, Mr. Bradley.
Oh, there you go. Okay, who wrote this?
The administration wrote the document, Mr. Bradley.
Did the board have any input on this prior to it getting to the committee for approval? Was anything, any meetings, groups, discussions, anything before it showed up onto the committee meeting as it is, as we see it now?
Was that the Athletic Committee where the document was discussed, sir?
Yeah, correct. Did anybody on the board participate with the administration in the creation of this document?
That's what the committee meetings are for, to review the documentation and provide input.
That's not my question. I said that the committee's to review it. I know, but hold on. I know, but let's try to get a better, closer question here. So my question is, this was handed to the athletic committee for review by those members. It was written by somebody. So my first question was, did anyone on that committee help write it before it got to the committee meeting? And then can we get that answered as a no, right? I mean, did anybody, Wayne, did you sit down and help write this? Did Steve or Larry, did you guys get together with somebody and say, hey, let's look at this? Was there any input from a director prior to its first draft arriving at a athletic committee? No? Okay, let's try the second question then. So were any changes made after the first draft of January 30th, 2020 by the athletic committee at any of the meetings? No changes at all. So this draft that you're looking at had no input from any director making a change, despite the tragedy that takes place within our schools?
There was questions and they were answered by the athletic committee and Mr. Spots concerning that particular item that you were referencing. And if you look at the duties of the coaches, it is within their responsibility to supervise the student athletes at all times.
Correct.
And as part of the athletic code of conduct in which every student signs, the particular incident that you're referencing is contained within that document. So you have a handbook and you have an athlete participation code of conduct, which is signed by the student and by the parent prior to the student participating in the athletic activity.
Correct. And I appreciate this handbook is definitely a step forward. However, it appears to have been written by the people that are going to apply this policy or this new handbook and was not given oversight by the board to review it to a point where we can hold someone accountable, right? Because inside of this document, there's no accountability or consequences associated with misconduct of a coach, principal, or athlete. It's actually devoid to the point where it's like Rita used to say, well, we can decide to follow these policies or we can decide not to follow these policies. Mr. Bradley, what are you worried about? You can't write it. But so I can read. You know, we can read. And when you read this, you realize that it's missing the accountability. So why wouldn't we have accountability, especially after the tragedy took place? And this handbook is new. Apparently there wasn't one before. Is that correct?
Mr. Cleaver, could you clarify on that? But I believe it is correct.
Yes, that is correct. This is something that they will be signing, yes.
This is new. So somehow, without this policy, we had criminal activity, if I'm correct, inside of our district by students that were unsupervised. Our first priority is for the safety of the students. So is this the answer to those problems? Because here inside of it, it talks about how to open up the locker room. I have to question, how was it opened before? Who opened it? How were those kids repeatedly allowed to be in those buildings completely unsupervised for serious amounts of time for shenanigans to take place, especially when we as a board that has oversight of our administration knows that the bell curve of activity and shenanigans is in that age group where these kids were left alone. Where's the culpability and responsibility? I'd like to ask Mr. Filer that as well, because it appears that the term, D says horseplay shall not be tolerated. I don't know what you guys were calling it. I hear all sorts of different stories. We don't have all the information, but we need to protect these students. And I agree that this is part of a step, but without the accountability, I mean, let's face it, back in the day, you guys had sexting teachers, right? And then it's a mess.
I would caution you about making any accusation that you are not sure of.
I'm not making any accusation.
I just did.
What did I make an accusation of, sir? It's public record. There's public record as to the actions by individual teachers, right? This is on the record. So it's our responsibility to review these things, and this handbook does not have the accountability for those misdeeds, or any misdeed. Why is it not inside the handbook? Is it because the administration wrote this? Is it because the administration wrote this that there is no accountability?
At this point, we have no other comment, Mr. Speaker.
I understand that, but I asked the question. Is there no accountability in this document because it was written by the administration and given to the board for approval to negate the opportunity for holding these people accountable?
David, are you asking for accountability on the coach's part or on the student's part, or both?
This is a coach's handbook, so there's really accountability to the coaches. Inside this handbook also talks about the principal and the staff that allow access, and accountability to the students and the athletes and the parents, really. So the reality is, if you go through a stop sign, there's a fine to be paid. There's points on your license, or there's a fine, or there's a whatever. And if you want to go to court and defend yourself and say, hey, I didn't mean to do that, or I did, and they want to have leniency, that's fine. But there is a rigid set of consequences. This does not have those consequences clearly defined for implementation by this board to ensure that the safety of students is maintained, and the safety of students is paramount. The basic concept of how this is supposed to work is the board gives the job to the administration and the subordinates through our organizational chart, and then they administer those. Here you're letting the people that are being administered to write their own laws that they're going to be held accountable to, and those laws that they wrote, those rules that they wrote, those handbooks that they wrote, have no accountability for themselves. So once they get caught, it's like Rita said before, well, it depends on who you are. I mean, we had, people tweeting out stuff that was just vulgar. And here you go, accountability. You had students being harmed, students being injured. That's a traumatic event. Bullying and hazing. They don't take it serious.
To approve a handbook, can we please call
this? Is not to approve a handbook. This is about governance, Ms. Spinelli. This is about governance. It's about signing a handbook, duties and responsibilities, and then the accountability.
We have a call to question, I believe, Mr. Stern.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody want to answer me?
That could be added?
Definitely.
Consequences?
It should. Why the administration can write a handbook that has no consequences and then the board rubber stamp it to know that no one can be held accountable is immoral. Let Rita, go ahead, let her vote on this one. Go ahead, throw it out there. Come on, call that question, Rita.
Suggestions on accountability on that, David?
Yes, the public has a right to know, the public has a right to comment, and we are public servants. It should be reviewed. The consequences and accountability should be on the table and discussed, and then they should be black and white inside this document. And it's the people that we serve that write those laws, because it's the people that we serve that are paying for their employees, public servants, public employees that are hired at this administration. So if, let's say, the public decides, look, I don't want my coaches using profanity, vulgarity, sexting people, whatever. So therefore, if a coach does these things, he'll get fired, or he'll get a week off, or he'll skip a game, or whatever they decide should be the consequences for an action. In this document, you don't have any of that. You have that they're not supposed to do it. They shouldn't do it. It's at the discretion. If they do it, it's at the discretion of the board, whether or not there should or shouldn't be consequences for these actions. This is the most ridiculous, rubber stamping, irresponsible, immoral thing I've ever seen an adult board do to a public that they serve. Now, I'm on my high horse, but oh, they're horrible. I can't even believe it's disgusting to think that Larry Stern, a wrestler, would even consider reading this thing and saying this is okay.
Okay, we do have a call to
disgusting.
Question, so Ms. Wagner, please do roll call vote. Thank you.
Sure.
You got a gavel to slap there, Larry?
Mr.
I don't
Van
need one.
Wentz?
It's Mrs. Spinelli
Yes.
already has called the question.
Yes.
Mr. Wentz said yes. Mr. Revere?
You have an attendee that's asking the question here. You have Gloria Bowman with her hand raised. Why aren't you listening to her?
We have no, this
The
is
agenda.
But she still wants to comment. She should have a right to speak.
Question and answer.
You don't have lawfully responsible, but she should be given the right to speak. Her right to speak should be
This is
paramount.
not a question and answer session. She can comment at the courtesy of the floor. That's how the meetings are run.
That's sad.
Opening them up. This is not a meeting for the public. It's a public
It's exactly a meeting for the public, sir.
In the end, thank
It's
you.
a meeting for the this meeting is for us to be held accountable to the public.
You have turned our meetings into circuses by allowing the constant interruption of trying to get business accomplished.
Yeah, but the business, hold on, the business is to listen to the people. That's what these meetings are for. You're missing that whole point.
Roll call vote, please, Mr. Bradley.
Okay, so I had a yes from Mr. Wentz, no from Ms. Spears. Mr. Belt is absent. Mr. David Bradley?
These meetings are for the public, Larry, and I'll vote no. And you should
Mr.
respect
Nathan
the public.
Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Holland? Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
No.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Yes, and I commend Mr. Desponses getting a first version of this document out. All the issues with safety are covered within this document and within the athletic codes of conduct. Let's not make it that nothing is contained in these documents to satisfy safety of the students. Thank you.
Most definitely, sir. And you just adopted it. It's not the first reading of it. This is a handbook. You guys just approved
It's
it.
the first time the handbook has been created.
And it lacks accountability. You're on a slippery slope, sir. You're a slippery slope. Immoral.
Any new business? Mr. Fowler has a new business?
First of all, clarification from earlier. Dave Bradley accused Rita of being incorrect. Under Article 4, Section 404, the same person shall not hold at the same time more than one of the offices of president, vice president, secretary, or treasurer of any board of school directors. So Ms. Spinelli was correct in saying that she could not be both vice president and treasurer.
Was I correct that she could resign from one to get the other?
That was not what was discussed. In fact, you told him that she could have it both and that she was wrong.
I respect it. Thank you. I was wrong. I appreciate that.
Under new business, June 1st, we have a hearing date on the Lehighton School Site LLC tax assessment appeal. I need some guidance on how you want us to proceed with that. I forwarded you their settlement proposal, which was just take the sale price from the auction and prorate it to the previous sale price, to the previous assessed value. If you want to defend that, I need to be able to retain for appraisals, or if you want me to go along the settlement, we can go that route. If you have any questions, let me know.
Mr. Fowler, can you please summarize again the issue at hand?
The purchasers of, I believe it was Franklin Township, filed a tax assessment appeal because they paid, they wanted it valued at the auction price, which they purchased it at, rather than the previously assessed values that the county had assessed at. Their proposed settlement was we take the total value of the previously assessed value of the previous assessments, apportion that percentage to the winning bid price, and use that as the new assessed values.
Do you know what that assessed value would be with that calculation?
If you, it was in the email that I sent to you, and then I re-forwarded, I believe, but those are the values that they're proposing.
This is Nathan. Have they since made improvements to that building that would affect the assessed value? If they have, will that be addressed?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's something that we would need to get an appraisal for.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's anything they pulled a building permit, I would think would be reassessed at the time construction was finished. But other more cosmetic repairs might not be addressed by that.
Could you repeat that, Nate? I didn't hear you.
So I was gonna say, if they pulled a building permit, then I would think the property would be reassessed at the completion of their permit. But if they've done more cosmetic work that didn't require a permit, it could have impacted the value of the building without necessarily impacting the assessed value.
That is correct, but I'm not aware of any improvements to it at this point. And again, we can reassess it every year if we become aware of major improvements structurally or cosmetically.
Okay. Mr. Bradley also has comment.
Mr. Filer, the information that you sent to the board as a proposed settlement is now being discussed by the board in an open meeting. That settlement, proposed settlement, is now a public document. Is that correct?
The
Pertinent document for review.
It's all public records with tax assessment.
Correct. So the document you sent as an attachment is part of this public record. So I can read it since I have it in front of me, correct? Or parts of it there been?
If you would accept it, it would be entered into the court as a court order.
Correct. And then it would be a public record. So this thing says that assessment, it says, as you know, the school district buildings and adjacent parcels that are the subject of this tax appeal were sold to my client in August of 2019 for total consideration of $402,500 at a public auction, whereas the sale was advertised, right? As is, and then later on in the thing, as is evident, because the implied market value is over $2 million and the actual market value, which is based on the purchase price of $402,500, we have analyzed the prior assessments and the percentage that each is of the whole and allocated the numbers accordingly based upon the purchase price. So they're basically trying to get assessed at the $402,000 rate and not the implied market value of $2 million, right? So therefore the assessment would be roughly a quarter of what it was.
Right.
Okay, so since we don't have all the information again, and this is new business, I think the public should weigh in on this. And I think they should have access to this information prior to the meetings. That's how the Sunshine Law works. And these items that have come before this board are in a public meeting because we do have to answer to the public, and that's why we're here. We're not here for us or the administration. We're here to be held accountable by the public.
There is 2 comments from Ms. Bowman as requested. Ms. Bowman?
I was going to make a comment about the handbook and some policies, but I thought Mr. Stern told me to do that under public comment.
This is a new discussion. I didn't know if you want to comment with Franklin under the new discussion that we're having.
No.
I will allow Barb Bowes. Ms. Bowes?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Filer misspoke. He said it was the Franklin School. It was not, it was Shoal David. That's the one that Mr. Bennett bought, the Public School Sites LLC, was the Shoal David building, not Franklin. Now, routinely, when someone buys a property in the district, they are assessed or reassessed for what they paid for it. And that's approximately 50% of the purchase price. And that is done routinely. It was done to me when I bought this property. As far as the school taxes were concerned. I seriously doubt you would win it in court, although there may be able to be some negotiation to bring up the assessed value somewhat, but not nearly to what it was assessed at prior to because of the low purchase price. And this is the risk you run when you set such a low price, but at least you'll be paying some taxes where the other 3 schools that were sold were getting no taxes. And that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley has comment.
Since we have to answer to the people, and this information was only provided to this board on Friday at 12:29 p.m., again, I think this should be reviewed by the public. Information, input should be taken by the board prior to making a decision, as required by the Sunshine Act. Thank you.
Yeah, since really it wasn't it was a discussion topic, Mr. Bradley, so thank you very much for your input. I think that input is appropriate, that we do some further information, and maybe Mr. Fowler can get us some further information. The court date is not a hard court date since everything was shut down. It'll probably be rescheduled anyway, so we can revisit this at a later date. Thank you. If that's okay with the rest of the board.
That's fine with me.
I'm good. Thank you.
Is this one of those famous consent items, or are you actually going to make a motion that we let the people speak first?
There was no motion.
I know, sir. I'm suggesting that you make one. You make a motion to say, as public servants, I think it's wise to let the people digest this information so that they can provide input to the board prior to our review and execution of their will. Thank you.
Someone did comment on it, Mr. Bradley, already, and of course there's no motion, so at this point, is there any other new?
One person commented on it and they didn't even see the document.
And of course, that's why we're not proceeding with any action at this point in time, sir. Courtesy of the board, public comment.
Back up. Wait, don't we have director's concerns? How come that was left off the agenda? I had given...
Because none were supplied.
They were supplied.
They
were supplied. Melissa, please tell them that the agenda allows somebody to put director's concerns on, because once the agenda is formed by Mr. Cleaver and Mr. Stern, if they do not address the issues of the board, they can add a director's concern, because that's the whole idea.
To be supplied 5 days before. I believe your concerns
You can't
were added on Friday after the completion of the agenda.
Thursday, 2:26 p.m.
Which is
moments after I got the agenda and saw that you skipped items on the agenda that were supposed to be there. So I'm bringing them up.
Sir, you didn't provide them.
New business.
Do we know what you're thinking?
New business.
Not, actually.
I'll add them as new business. Please call me when you're ready for new business.
I believe we're at courtesy of the floor.
No, let's go back.
Now we're still in new business, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bradley. It's your turn.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, we discussed pushing the due dates of taxes to save our constituents in this time of great need. It was discussed that it would go through the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee reviewed it in front of whoever showed up to the Finance Committee Zoom. No recommendation was made. No official action was taken other than to discuss it. And then it's not on the minutes or the agenda here today. So that item number one of my director's concern is, why aren't we having this information provided from us after you did death by committee so that we can review it and protect these citizens?
Number one, my input on it, as I did attend the Finance Committee, it was discussed. There were many different things proposed, whether it's pushing the due date, pushing the date completions of 12/31, exception by application. We have 6 weeks before those documents go to print. And at this point, we don't know what the state of Pennsylvania is going to inflict upon us from a ruling perspective. So there is no recommendation on the document tonight due to those facts.
Okay, I'll move to the next one and then I'll make my motion for that one. All right, the next one was the discussion on the tennis courts. Now that was addressed by the Lehigh Valley Health Network. At the finance meeting, the finance committee was trying to railroad in a St. Luke's proposal without review of the Lehigh Valley Health Network proposal. Where does that stand, and why is that not to be discussed for public review in this meeting? I'll make a motion afterwards. If you can explain why, maybe I don't need to make a motion.
We have requested that they do we have reached out to both of them to do their presentation and proposal at our athletic committee meeting next month.
Okay, and who was doing the original negotiations with Lehigh Valley Health Network, and under what committee, what auspices, what authority, what power did somebody have to try to negotiate trading hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising benefits for a tennis court? Who was behind that negotiation on this board?
Again, both of them presented proposals to the administration.
I didn't ask that question. I said, who on the board was involved in that negotiation?
We answered that last time you asked the question.
Okay, so nobody was involved. So it was a rogue system. The 2019 maintenance budget was discussed at the finance committee meeting, and we asked why it was over budget by nearly $1 million, and what was actually spent this year so far on that budget, and why we're so far off budget. That was also not answered. Do we need to make a motion to get that information, or can it be presented at this board meeting as it was promised? Crickets? Can we get the information that was promised to this board by the administration at this meeting regarding the maintenance budget?
Mr. Crowley, I don't have that information for you.
Okay. Patty, do you? Is Miss Denicola in attendance?
Mr. Bradley, I have no comments for you at this point.
Okay.
That is the end of discussion. I have nothing else to say to you.
There you go. Thanks. Okay. So what are our existing budget shortfalls for 2019?
Mr. Bradley, you have the budget reports in front of you. Every month you receive them. You are at the liberty to review them at your will.
Correct. And my question is, for the public, what are the existing current budget shortfalls for 2020?
That information has been shared, and that is the end of discussion. You are not going to lambaste me with your diatribe of nonsense.
Okay. So you're not going to answer your board, is what you're saying. Thank you. So what was the results of the hazing incidents? Larry, do we have any results to that? We said they would get back to us. We saw
actually
nothing.
At our council's advice, there is no thing to discuss on that particular incident. That is an incident that has been handled and has been handled by the appropriate within the authorities and within the district. And no comments should be made about that incident in public.
Yet we have a new handbook. We have new procedures on keeping kids from having access to buildings. So actions took place, policies were changed, things were done. Who was behind those actions, and where did the stakeholders have input prior to those actions so that they could discuss not specifics, but the generalities of how we're going to protect our students? I mean, this district has a long history of not protecting students, right? We want to protect them. So where's the committee? Where's the board? Who's doing this? It appears that the administration's doing it, and the board has no oversight. We had a child pediatric ICU. I mean, what's taking place for the anti-hazing or the assaults? What is this board doing? Mr. Stern, why is that not on the agenda to be discussed, reviewed, and collected public input?
That topic, Mr. Bradley.
Okay, great. Good for you. Hide from another one. Okay. The hiring practice of this district and the lack of the sunshine compliance regarding committee meetings has been shown prevalent and prolific. When are we going to reel in and comply with the Sunshine Act in our committee meetings?
Actually, we do comply with the Sunshine Act. The meetings are advertised, the documents are available for those who register, and they're actually available on the website. So I do think we're in full compliance with the Sunshine Act, sir.
Excellent. Let's ask Mr. Filer. Mr. Filer, is a committee part of the agency and therefore required to follow the Sunshine Act, including providing public comment prior to an official action like a recommendation to a board?
Mr. Bradley, please submit all your questions to me in writing before the board meetings. That way I'll have legal citations to answer you.
These have been asked dozens of times over the last 3 years. This board is incomplete.
And they've been answered multiple times.
But not to the satisfaction of the law, sir.
I want to be correct when I provide you your
I
answer.
will make sure I write it down for you. No problem. Okay. I make a motion that we postpone the due date of the taxes until December 31st and provide them with the discounted rate due on December 31st. Can I get a second for that motion, please?
Second it.
Thank you, Gail. Please allow the public to comment.
At this time, Ms. Bose, I believe.
Yeah. I went back through the numbers and used, I believe, the numbers from the budget or the AFR that was filed with the state. And I would like to know historically what percentage of taxpayers pay during the discounted period. When discussing it with other people who have mortgages, they say that most mortgage companies pay during the discounted period. I certainly try to do so whenever possible, and many people do. I was told that approximately 80% of the people pay during that discounted period. And I don't know if that's correct. But if that is correct, then the total cost to the district would be about $69,086. There are a lot of people hurting here. We are a Title I school, which means we have an awful lot of kids with reduced or free lunches, meaning that the families are financially challenged. This shutdown and stay-at-home order has caused even more harm, especially if they were unable to get through and file for unemployment benefits, which seems to be the case for many. It certainly would be in the interest of the community to do so. I believe at the last Zoom meeting, Larry, you asked for that information to be provided at the finance meeting, but it was not provided. It is certainly something you should consider. I realize we have not even gone into budget discussions as far as tax increases yet, which will, of course, put people at greater financial risk. And I understand the need that may occur for a tax increase to happen, given the finances of the district. I would like to have that information. Historically, last 3, 4, 5 years, what percentage of the taxpayers paid during the discounted period, so that certainly a much closer number on what revenues the district would lose would be a little more accurate. Thank you.
And Ms. Bowman?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think the motion at this point might be a little bit premature. If I recall in that finance meeting, Ms. Denicola did mention that there are so many ifs from the state budget, as well as the CARES Act, I know that Nathan came up with another solution. So is there any harm in waiting for the next finance meeting, or if we can further get information, hopefully from the state, as well as I like Bo's suggestion of taking, seeing how many people actually pay within the discounted time frame. Thank you.
We have Miss Autumn Fry. Miss Fry?
How are you?
Miss Fry?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, go ahead, thank you.
Is this courtesy of the floor or is this new business for discussion comment?
This is regarding the motion for allowing taxes without penalty be paid to December 31st that was made by Mr. Brown.
Well, I will wait for courtesy of the floor then.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kemmer?
Hi, thank you for giving me some time. Larry, the last meeting we had, I was siding with the fact that more input needed to be added to make an educated decision on it. I listened to the Finance Committee meeting, and there was really nothing that transpired from our last school board meeting until the finance meeting that actually took care of those questions. And my question to you is, what will change until the next meeting? I know Barb's asking for some historical data, but since the last meeting that was done anyway, so what is there to say that we'll actually get the information needed so that we can make an educated, decision with this? I do agree with what Barb said, that most people that have homes and they're paying for their, paying the taxes with their escrows, that gets paid, which is probably a vast majority of the people in the Iton already pay up front. I know the finance meeting was supposed to provide that information, but all we heard was exorbitant and nothing that was data to make an educated, decision. So what's going to change until next meeting, or is it going to just be more of the same? End of comment.
Thank you. I have Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bradley.
Yes, I just wanted to speak up basically the same input I mentioned at the finance meeting. First of all, there's additional guidelines going to be coming from the state as to what we're required to do, and I think anything we try to do ahead of that would be premature at this point. The other thing, I think the biggest thing that would impact our district, obviously we're counting on money to stream in from tax revenue as the year goes on so that we can keep our bills paid on a weekly and a monthly basis. And that's largely driven by when these due dates land. If we were to push out our first due date to the very end of the year, it's not to say the money wouldn't come in, but that timeline would completely change. And the biggest issue is it would be unknown until it happens. It would leave us with very little information to properly plan for the revenue that's coming in. It's also worth noting that my taxes, for instance, are paid, at least in my home, are paid by my mortgage company. They're escrowed. So it impacts me. It doesn't impact me at all if those taxes are paid in September, if they're paid in December. But if the school district were to put out a ruling that those taxes aren't due till December, my mortgage company is likely to pay those in December. So I fully support something that would give people relief who need it, whose income has been impacted by this COVID crisis. But I think we'd be much wiser to make that on an as-needed basis, whether that's, I don't know exactly what that would look like, people requesting it, people applying for it, rather than just blanket giving it to everyone where it may not even be needed, but would have significant impact on the school district. So I fully support doing our best to work with people, especially those who've been impacted financially here. But we need to make sure we're doing that in a wise way and also taking our own needs into account. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you. Well, the expenditure, that large driver that Mr. Fuller is talking about is a function of expenditures. And the biggest problem is this district is financially broke. right? And it's broke because of mismanagement, right? It's acting without data, and it's abdicating its responsibility back to the state when we're local districts responsible for our own sustainability. Governor Wolf was very specific. He thought this was a great idea to postpone the acceptance of those dollars because they are hurting and they need that support. And to not do that when we serve the community that we are in, when you don't do it, Nathan, that's when the state steps in and says, you guys won't do it, I will. And the reality is, when we have a responsibility to the stakeholders, we should meet it. And therefore, this is a negligible thing that we can do on our end, and a significant thing we can give and do for the people. Now, we used to have $16 million in the bank. I agree this would be a better decision if we still had that money in the bank. We used to not be in $100 million in debt. I agree. This would be a lot easier if we weren't paying $3 million a year on obligations, right? But the reality is we have a responsibility, and the large driver, as you said, is a function of our own mismanagement. Thank you.
I believe there's a motion and a second on the floor still.
I have my hand raised.
Yeah, so the Sunshine Act requires that if someone makes a comment, you keep going back and forth, Mr. Cleaver. You don't just do once and done.
I'm sorry. I thought Ms. Bill's already commented on this.
I did, but I want to address Mr. Fowler's comment now. My concern, not that it's a bad idea, it's actually an excellent idea. But while we're collecting data, let's collect the data of what it would cost to set up such a program, and who would be responsible for deciding whether or not people are truly in need, how would it be administered, and how they would apply for it. My concern is, even if we're just going by man hours in labor to set it all up, would it actually cost more to do it on an as-needed basis? Specifically, since it would also need to be reviewed to make sure it's lawful by the solicitor, then it would cost us to just give it across the board. I understand the cash flow issues, but that would be negated if we had a fund balance, which we do not. Now, Ms. Denicola did state that we would have to take out a short-term loan, basically a bridge loan, to cover our shortfall until the taxes came in. I'd be happy to pay mine in the beginning. Not gonna pay a lot of your bills, but I think most would, because the district is actually doing something to help the community. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Mr. Stern?
Any other comments? So Ms. Wagner, roll call vote on pushing the deadlines for payment to 12/31/2020. I'm not sure, since it was quite some time ago, and it is extending the discount period as well to 12/31/2020, Mr. Bradley?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking me? Yes, that's 100% correct. Push the whole thing to 12/31 as directed by the governor, in great respect to our local authority to collect and disperse taxes. And we should be able to find a way to manage this process. I know I could do it. I don't see it as an issue. But you guys all are scared of taking responsibility. I don't know why. We'll see.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second and public comment on pushing the discount rate and the due date to be the same date of 12/31/2020.
Correct.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Beltz, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Most definitely.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
I don't feel it's a wise decision at this time, so it's a no for me.
Mr. Stephen Holland? Mr. Stephen Holland? Welcome back. Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
No, for the same reason, I would like to make sure that we have all our information before we make this decision. I'm fine with pushing the due date, but not the discount date.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
I agree with Rita.
That's a no.
Yes. Or no.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Although I'm in complete favor of helping our community from a tax burden perspective at this point, we do have a 6-week window yet to determine that information and when the due dates will be due, so I'm going to vote no to extend the dates.
Okay. And then one more time, Mr. Stephen Holland?
No.
So I have 3 yes, 5 no, motion denied.
Okay, next one. I make a motion in great consideration to these taxpayers and in consideration to Nathan and Rita's comments that we just push the due date of everyone's taxes to the 31st. I want to compromise and let's give these people some relief. I make a motion, looking for a second, to push the due date of all taxes to December 31st without suffering a penalty.
I'll second that.
No, this is just for the due date.
Yep, we just want to give them a safety
This
line.
is just for the due date, not for the discount.
Correct. Give these people a safety line. Let's try to help them out.
Okay, so it's a new motion.
Discussion, please.
Again, I just think it's premature to make this decision at this point. I feel that we're going to have guidance coming from the state that will make it much easier for this process to be coordinated through our district, through the other townships that are affected. I think we're wise to wait at least a month for that, and then, again, gather additional information, find what we can do for our community.
Nathan, you had a month to find whatever information you needed. You're the treasurer that's blocking us from the information. I find that response to be pathetic.
Ms. Bowles has a comment.
It was to push.
Ms. Bowles, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I did not realize the previous motion considered pushing the due date back. I think we should have the 2% discount period. And then if you decide not to extend that, then perhaps you would consider pushing the flat rate tax period to December 31st. So that there would be no interest paid on people that paid after the regular date of the flat rate. Like I said before, I would be willing and able to pay my taxes during the regular 2% discount rate. I think many would. The problem here is we asked for information. It was supposed to be brought to the finance meeting. It was not. I agree we should collect more data and we should get all the data to make an informed and intelligent decision, or you should. The problem is the data is not forthcoming. So I'd like to see someone make a motion that the data will be forthcoming if you're going to push this off for another month. Thank you.
Ms. Denicola, can you provide the data, or do we have to get it from the tax collectors themselves?
This data will be shared at the next Finance Committee meeting on June 8th.
Thank you so much.
I think it's worth noting too that we can look at data on when taxes have come in the past, but we have no way of knowing when everybody would be sure to pay this time if we extend the deadline. We can make an educated guess, but it's just that. It's a guess.
It's always a guess. Every year.
I just want to make one statement. While I can appreciate that we need to provide relief for our taxpayers, and I agree with that. However, we have certain obligations as it relates to educating our students. And unfortunately, the state of Pennsylvania fails to properly fund education to Pennsylvania students. That is the ultimate issue at hand. We are faced with many mandates and many challenges, and even many more challenges due to the pandemic, with no ability to fund those challenges, no funding mechanism from the state to support the state students. It is unfortunate that Pennsylvania chooses to put the financial challenges of funding student education on the backs of local taxpayers, but that is the system that we currently live within. There's a lot of things that we would all like to have, we would like to give back to the community, give to our students, but as Mr. Bradley has repeatedly said, we need to live within our means.
And let's give Patty Denicola the opportunity to take back her tone deaf statement she just made about how the state doesn't fund us properly when this district has mismanaged. I mean, you can just look at a stadium, you can look at the fact that we don't look at the bills before they pay them. There's so much mismanagement. They're complaining about an old business manager as if he's the scapegoat for the world. But this district's been under budget for years and still. And they borrow money. It looks like, according to the AFR, that finally showed up months after it was physically due as a responsibility to the district. It's tone deaf that they're thinking that. That AFR shows that this district spent $500,000 on more classrooms and stuff as an asset purchase. This district has a bunch of rubber stampers that aren't doing their job, holding the subordinate administration accountable to not only get the information, but to review it. And whereas I respect Mr. Fowler's business ability, I question it at this time because that's ridiculous that he had a month to get whatever we needed as the treasurer and failed to do it. It's just, I don't know how they get away with that. How do you look at yourself in a mirror? I mean, that is the most tone-deaf thing I've ever heard in my life.
Mr. Stern, do we have a motion on the floor? I'm trying to make sure.
Can I state one more thing? Since Patty has taken over, I think that there are a lot more controls in place on spending. It's a shame it wasn't done a very long time ago. We wouldn't be here. And yes, the pandemic has put us between a rock and a hard place, but we were there already. If no one can pay their taxes, you're going to be in a lot worse position. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Stern?
Is there any further comments?
Yes. Barb, I appreciate you think that some more controls are there, but we're nowhere near even the basic standard of financial control over a district. There is no oversight. They rubber stamp things. We don't even get the bank statements, the bank records. It's non-verified reports. You can look across this state at Auditor General reports of districts that crashed and burned, I'll say, financially because of the same things that this district is doing. It is a problem that permeates the state. That doesn't make it right. And it's tone deaf to think that this board doesn't have that responsibility when we are the sole responsibility to collect and disperse the taxes from the people we serve for their benefit, not necessarily the district. And as far as the mandates that are required of our students, the taxpayers and the district should very easily identify which ones are mandates and which ones are optional. And they should be scrutinized by the volunteer donations, I'll use the term, of our taxpayers that choose to do things that are not mandates for the benefit of our districts. We are greatly indebted to them, and we have greatly indebted them with $119 million of debt because we took more than they asked us to take. We are servants. This district has an attitude issue. It is despicable. Thank you.
While I agree with you, Dave, on the fact that there is no oversight or verification on a needed basis, I merely wanted to point out that we have seen more control over spending than we have in the past with Patty, and I wanted to let her know that I see it.
And yeah, and you're correct. When the wallet is empty, it is definitely harder to overspend. But we're still in a negative budget scenario, and this board approved a negative budget when it doesn't have the means to increase the taxes to cover it.
Okay.
It has a negative budget. I'm having a conversation. Why are you cutting me off, sir? Why are you cutting me off when you realize that as president you have a responsibility?
You keep reiterating the same information.
Well, let's correct it.
And well, we can't do it right now.
Okay, I'll wait for the next motion. I'll do the next motion.
Budget that
Next
has
motion.
been done in the last 4 years that met our spending levels from the previous years. The
Correct.
rhetoric is getting old. There's a motion on the floor to extend the regular dates of the tax payments to 12/31/2020, leaving discount rates in effect as they currently stand. I would like a roll call vote on that, please, Mrs. Wagner.
Sure. Okay, so motion by Dave Bradley, second by Gail Mahalik to push the due date to 12/31/20. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
No.
Mr. Stephen Holland? Mr. Stephen Holland? Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli? Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
No.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
No.
Ms. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. Larry Stern?
Respectfully, I just can't do it at this point in time, so no.
Okay, and Mr. Stephen Holland?
No.
Okay, so that's 3 yes, 5 no, 1 absent, motion denied.
Okay, next motion. With that last 5-3, I make a motion. We're going to accept the fact that Patty's going to show up and committed to the June 8th date, so I don't need to make that motion, which is nice. Thank you for bringing it up, Barb. We're glad to help you. But the next motion is that this board opens our current budget, given the new state of affairs, and creates a balanced budget. I make a motion that this board uses its authority to reopen the budget and create a balanced budget. Can I get a second for that motion, please?
I'll second that. Okay, discussion.
Discussion, please.
At this time, nothing from attendees. And nothing from the board at this time for regarding this motion.
Okay, roll call, please, Mr. Wagner, on that agenda item, on that motion.
Okay, so this is to open the current budget and create a balanced budget. Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
I have my hesitations as to what exactly Mr. Bradley means by a balanced budget, so I'm going to say no at this time.
Mr. Stephen Holland?
Mr. Nathan Fuller, if you really didn't understand the motion of what a balanced budget is as a business owner, why didn't you ask during the conversation? And let me answer for you. It is a, I understand, but I got to help the guy. You got to help the guy. How could you not help him? He doesn't know what a balanced budget is. You got to help him. He's a director. He's a volunteer director. He should know what it is. I can help him. I can help him. He's a volunteer. He should get the information.
Mr. Stephen Holland? Mr. Stephen Holland?
No.
Ms. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
No.
Ms. Joy Beers? Yeah. Mr. Larry Stern?
At this time, I'm voting no because by voting yes, it would put this district in an enviable position of being non-compliant with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We will do our best to get through this and find ways to get where we need to get in the next couple of years. The problem that was created over 4 cannot be fixed in 1. Thank you.
So motion is denied.
And the last
3
one.
yes, 5 no.
Yep, and the last one for the 5 to 3 is: are we going to read Betty Wolf's letter? We had a month to review it. It discusses holding the district accountable to their responsibility to protect these students under our care.
I'd like you to comment on that topic, please.
Yes, thank you. I did actually reach out to Ms. Wolf, and her message to me was she did not want it to be used to pit one side against the other.
And it will not be. If we can just read it, the public can decide what they want to do. It's not about pitting one side against the other. It's just about
making it a public document, sir.
She made it a public document when she mailed it to the district.
To just the board member.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, it is a public. Talk to Mr. Filer,
It
please.
is not. File your paperwork and do whatever you want to do, but it is not a public document.
I will release it now. Thank you.
And you are liable for all the information that gets coming out of that, not the district. Thank you.
Nope, I'm on a board meeting. I'm releasing it now during the meeting. I'm handing it to the public during this meeting. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr.
It's very easy to do.
You did not unilaterally act for the board.
I did not. I'm acting for myself, sir. I'm acting as a director, sharing information with my board so they can address it.
Unilaterally act as a director.
I'm not acting as a director unilaterally. Then they better do a motion that says stop it. Someone write a motion that says don't let Dave release it.
The motion to do it last time.
Nope. This is a new meeting, sir.
So that motion is
New
still
meeting.
in effect, sir.
Wow, you're really arrogant, aren't you, Larry? This is a new meeting. This is a new meeting. This is a new meeting. It's not about pitting. It's about sharing information with the district and the stakeholders.
The motion was to not release.
No, the motion was to talk to Mrs. Wolf.
Talk to Mrs. Wolf.
All you gave the answer.
I don't want it released publicly, and that's not going to happen.
No, she said she doesn't want it to pit two people against each other. I'm in complete agreement with it. Are you pitted against it? Are you pitted against it, Mr. Stern?
Floor, please. Mr. Bradley, cease.
What's that?
We are courtesy of the.
I asked a question.
Continue.
We have Ms. Fry for courtesy of the floor. Ms. Fry?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now it is my turn to speak. Sunshine Act, everybody, you need to be quiet. It is my turn now, my First Amendment. Okay? First of all, I'd like to say, I would like Melissa Wagner to read what she read earlier by Miss Barbara Bowes regarding June Potts, okay? Because I was rudely interrupted by somebody's television playing in the background, okay, by a board member. That was first disrespectful. If you don't know how to do Zoom, don't be on the computer, okay? So, Mrs. Wagner, can you please read what you had stated earlier when the meeting first started? As I could not hear what you read from Miss Barbara Bowes regarding June Potts' summer school, because I could not hear you because there was a television loudly blaring in the background. And that is my First Amendment right.
Okay, that was regarding.
And you as a school board member should be ashamed of yourself.
I can reread it. That was, the first one was the hiring of June Potts as high school summer school teacher.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Sure. So summer school is not possible this year. Will we still as a district have to pay for the teaching hours under Act 13 if this motion is approved? If not able to be taught in person, will virtual summer school actually benefit those that need the extra help? Why is there no information on how many hours per week for how many weeks summer school would be offered? Why is there no cost for this position associated with the motion? There is not enough detail in this motion and it should be rewritten. While everything is in question right now, certainly the possibility that there will be no summer school this year should be included if Act 13 or another act passed later for payment would apply to paying for this if unable to be offered? That was the question. The answer is summer school is required to be offered for our students who are in need of credit recovery. This will take place the same way it has over the past several years. The district offers summer school to students while using the online program that is currently offered through our LAVA program. Summer school will run for 2 weeks in June and for no more than 6 hours per day at the contracted rate of pay. In addition, the district is also required to offer an extended school year program to students who qualify, and this program will be offered virtually to the students. And that's it.
Thank you. And the next time you have a school board meeting, make sure your TVs are off so the rest of the people can hear what's going on when the meeting starts. And that's what I have to say. As a stakeholder and a taxpayer, we have the right to hear what's going on without what's going on in the background. I, as a public person and pay taxes in this school district, I have my TV off. You should do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Is there any other comments?
Yes, we have Ms. Bose. Ms. Bose?
Okay, I wanted to address comments that were made in the beginning when Missy read my email. Missy did contact me and asked me if I would rather read it myself. I told her it was fine for her to read it. It's how it is directed on the splash page for the district. It does say we should send them to Missy. I had no issue with that. So I don't want anyone to think that my rights to speak were violated. I was asked and I allowed Missy to read them. Secondly, my next question is, will the Zoom meetings be posted on the district website or somewhere else so everyone can view them and hear them basically? And if not, why?
The first meeting was not recorded. This one is actually being recorded and will be posted on the website.
Well, that's interesting because it up in the left-hand corner, it did say recording for that first meeting.
Okay, we do not have access. We went back and reviewed it. It was not,
Right.
They were not recorded. But
I tried that. This is Missy. I did try to record that Zoom meeting and we didn't have it released that I could record. So even though it showed it was recording, I had no access to it. Mr. Cleaver is correct.
Okay.
I recorded it. I'll release it. Thank you.
All right. There was one more thing I wanted to comment on. As far as the budget and being somewhere around $3 million in the red starting 2021 school year, and yes, I understand that may change. You have a lot to do in the next 6 weeks before the budget because you cannot, even with the state allowing you to, raise taxes enough to cover that shortfall. My question is this: what programs are you looking at cutting? If we have programs that are mandated by the state and we have programs that are not, unfortunately, this is going to be something you're going to have to look at, and I want to make sure that you are looking at everything possible we can do to bring that back. And it's just a shame that the kids will be harmed by this, but without having direct access to all the data, this is how it looks from the outside, that you're going to have to cut programs. And that's all I have at this time.
Or Barb, actually just not add new ones. I mean, I heard we created a position to get the football coach. We created this thing called Assistant Athletic Director. Is that true, Mr. Cleaver?
That current position is also our alternative ed director too. We're bringing students back. So it's not just an assistant athletic director. And that athletic director position encompassed also the current building and grounds director and also 2 administrative Act 93 positions. So we went from 3 to 1 with that. So that technically is not correct.
So did the board decide to make these title changes, appointments.
All Act 93 positions have job descriptions that are approved by the school board.
Correct. So this got in front of the school board somewhere that these changes were going to take place, and the board authorized them.
Any new position has to be approved by the board.
So when was this put in front of the board?
I'd have to go back and look to be accurate with that.
Rubber Stansburgers unite.
It was there because I remember seeing it.
There you go. Thank you, Barb.
Now, it reminded me, what you just said reminded me of the other comment I wanted to make. The concern in the coach's handbook is at the end of every portion where it talks about duties and responsibilities of the head coach, assistant coach, etc. The last sentence says that these are guidelines. And guidelines changes any accountability. It makes it subject to interpretation by who's interpreting it at the time. I think that part, if nothing else, should be reworded. Thank you.
Ms. Bowman? Ms. Bowman?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. This is in reference, I'm going to start with the first readings of the policies. I like Mr. Stern's idea and Mr. Holland's idea to have any kind of input from the community regarding those policies, so when you meet again as a policy committee, you can review them. But my recommendations are to be very specific of what it is in the policy you don't like. Do not do it in generalities, because there are things that I've read through that I find acceptable, as well as making sure that the solicitor reviews those for any kind of legal implications. And then third, along Barbeau's idea with the district coach's handbook, do all the coaches meet with the athletic director to review that handbook, sign off on the code of conduct? And is that where that accountability piece might be looked at for making sure the regulations are being followed?
Yes, that will be reviewed with all the coaches, and there is a sign off for each coach to say that they read and understand.
Okay, and how about the accountability factor? Which, I think we all need to be held accountable for making sure that our kids are safe, and I know they're all doing a good job, and people do make mistakes. But I think there should be some type of clause in there or some kind of understanding that the coaches know the importance of such a factor. Thank you.
I agree with you, Gloria. There should be some accountability. Regretfully, there is not in this setup. We have one last thing, by the way, before we move ahead. It's the motion to release the draft audit report that was presented to the district by the company. Let me finish. Please, sir. I would like to make a motion seeking a second to release the draft audit report to the board that hired the auditor that is there to check and oversee our subordinate administration with that audit. That's who they're verifying it. We should be able to see the draft audit report that was received by the district. Can I get a second on that motion, please? Am I allowed to second my own motion?
No, you can't.
Second it.
God bless you, Gail. Thank you.
Comments or questions on the motion? Actually, we don't even really have to recognize the motion since it is out of new business, but I will recognize it as a courtesy. Anyone have any comments on this particular motion?
Ms. Fry, do you have comment on this motion? Ms. Fry, is your comment for this motion, or is it under courtesy of the floor?
Can you repeat that?
Is yours for regarding the motion, or are you still waiting for courtesy of the floor because Mr. Bradley went back to new business?
I must have raised my hand by accident. I do apologize.
Okay.
Thank you. Hearing no comment.
Ms. Bose?
It was actually old business, but go ahead.
Ms. Bose?
Yes. I think Patty explained why it was not released, but I do remember either hearing or reading that the audit was sent back to the auditors to have something corrected.
The audit firm will be presenting the board the entire audit at the June board meeting.
Okay, I get that. I'm just wondering and I understand what happened because they're in Monroe County and with the virus and everything. But I do remember, and I don't remember if it was at a board meeting or if it was at a finance meeting, that it was stated that it was sent back to them because something needed to be corrected. I'm wondering if that's why it's so late in getting to us, because they had to make corrections.
Yeah, this whole process reeks of financial engineering, Barb. The auditor should be reporting back to the board.
Stop with your nonsense. You manipulate every situation to your benefit, and enough is enough. It's 10 after 10 at night, and I would guess that everybody is tired of hearing your diatribe.
That's fine. I just want the audit report, ma'am.
Financial mishandling happening. The auditors have not signed off on the report because they are waiting for certain documents to be received back from them as part of their normal audit. One of those things is a legal letter. They are waiting for a response to the legal letter before they finally sign off and release. They will be presenting the entire audit to the entire board in June.
But we can get this report. There's nothing against it. We're the district. You have the responsibility. If I made a motion,
the rules of privacy.
there is no.
What you want, and you put it out publicly because you feel it's your right as a public official.
Correct.
With all due respect, as an individual public official, you have no rights. You have authority as a board of 9.
Therefore,
when you act individually, you put the district and the entire board at risk.
and so does financial engineering.
The auditors asked that it not be released. I could not release it because you, sir, cannot be trusted.
But the reality is that the authority does not occur to the individual subordinate employee. It is the district that hired the auditor.
We have no input from the public on this anymore, Mr. Cleaver.
There is no more hands raised at this.
Roll call vote, Mrs. Wagner, to release, voting yes will release the draft of the audit.
Correct. Motion to release draft audit report to the board that hired the auditors. Mr. Nathan Fuller.
No.
Mr. Stephen Holland. Mr. Stephen Holland. Mrs. Gail Mahalik.
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli.
No.
Mr. Wayne Wentz.
No.
Mr. Joy Beers.
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley.
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern.
No.
I'll go back. Mr. Holland. Mr. Stephen Holland.
No.
Okay, so I have 3 yes, 5 no, 1 absent, motion denied.
This time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Spinelli and Mr. Wentz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Roll call vote on adjournment.
Mr. Stephen Holland? Mr. Stephen Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Gail Mahalik?
Yes.
Mrs. Rita Spinelli?
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Wentz?
Yes.
Mr. Joy Beers?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Belts, absent. Mr. David Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Nathan Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Larry Stern?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.